Last time we read Spider-Man's first 5 issues, so go watch that video and come back here because we're doing the next 5 issues of The Amazing Spider-Man. So we left off after the best issue thus far featuring Dr. Doom, so how are old Stan and Jack gonna follow that up? Well, with some delicious mid-soup. As a quick reminder, every comic featured on this channel is every comic I have ever read, so bear with me here while I try to figure out what the hell's going on. Now, I might have heard of the Lizard before, but honestly, without the hindsight interest that someone like Doc Ock bring in the last video, there's a lot less to work with. So there's this super lizard in the Florida Everglades that's like, get out of my swamp, kind of Shrek style. So naturally, as the news spreads, J Jonah Jameson, Spider-Man's #1 hater, challenges him to take the lizard down, which continues the most bizarre characterization we saw in the last video. Spider-Man only cares about money and fame. Really, throughout these issues, Spider-Man definitely comes across as bolder. He flirts with his classmate, which we'll get to a little bit later. He even breaks into Triple J's office and is like, not only am I gonna take the lizard down, but you better send someone to photograph me. So because Peter's the only person who's been able to photograph Spider-Man consistently, J Jonah Jameson sends him. And now normally I would add this to the dumb plans by Peter Parker list, but they throw in a little bit of a curveball because J Jonah Jameson says that he's going with. My eyes instantly perked up at this because throughout all of these issues, the JJJ arcs have been by far the most interesting. So Peter goes to Florida, gets his ass kicked by the lizard, and is like, okay, there's this reptile expert doctor I should go and see. And get this, that guy, the reptile expert doctor, is the lizard. I specifically love this frame he gives to his wife. To my wife, love, Curtis, which is his last name. And I definitely think this is more of a creative story than some of the other issues we've read, but I think it's just paced much worse. They have a lame fight scene. I like this panel, and he goes back to normal. And I do like that there's a semblance of a wholesome ending for all the parties, but otherwise, this is as mid as it gets, folks. So with that, it's time to add The Amazing Spider-Man issue #6 to our tier list. And sorry, reptilian overlords, this is getting a solid D tier. But at the very end of the issue, we get yet another fourth wall break from the editors saying that a previous villain, despite only being 6 issues in, will return. It's Vulture 2, Electric Boogaloo. I was pretty darn shocked when they brought back the Vulture of all characters, and call me doubly shocked, but they say it was due to fan letters? It's so interesting to think how much my initial impressions differ from someone actually in 1963, because if you ask me, the Vulture, aside from maybe the Lizard, is the weakest issue thus far. So does the return of the Vulture exceed where the first one doesn't? Not really. Vulture gets out of prison, Spider-Man tries to fight him, but oh no, we have to take a picture worth a fortune because why else would we want to confront an actual supervillain?
Of course, there's a lot of cheating in there. A lot of they fight.
Spider-Man figures out a way to win, and there's some flirting with some problematic age gaps. And the issue ends, and there's actually a note from Stan Lee being like, yeah, we know this was a weird ending, but Spider-Man's a weird hero, and in the next issue, he does some weird things. And yeah, like the other issues have ended with an unambiguous like, yay, good guys win, bad guys lose, but this was definitely very bizarre. So what weird things does Spider-Man do next? Well, hold your horses there. I damn near caught myself trying to move on before giving this our very first F tier. Now you may notice I have had less things to talk about for these first 2 issues compared to the last video, but fear not, my friend, for this is a special tribute to teenagers issue. This is another 2-parter, and we open with a strange machine in science class, but before we can learn about it, Flash breaks Peter's glasses and threatens to beat him up. And this is where I want to bring up a point I didn't exactly address last time. Everybody's really mean. Even Peter. Peter Parker here is not a true hero. Just so far, his only obsession is money. He is partly responsible for Uncle Ben's death, is not particularly nice to Aunt May, conflicted about just stealing money, letting Flash Thompson die, and it just feels like this world is so angry. So I'm actually really interested in how this Peter Parker, who has been holding in so much anger, is gonna finally deal with hitting the breaking point with Flash. But before we gotta go back to the strange machine in class, which is basically ChatGPT in a robot suit. And while I have and will continue to make fun of the writing, Stan Lee has basically predicted the proto versions of computer viruses and large language models. Like, the students have to feed it facts before getting an answer, and I just think that's really cool. So the CEO is like, well, who wants to ask it a question? And someone suggests to ask it for Spider-Man's true identity. So as they're feeding facts about Spider-Man, Peter's internally freaking out, but as it spits out an answer, Flash and Peter get into it, and I love how the teacher is like, you guys just gotta go fight, do it in the gym. In said gym, Peter knocks out Flash in an accidental sucker punch, but two goons try and steal the living brain, and it goes crazy. And then Spider-Man and Brain have probably the worst fight so far. Spider-Man disables the controls, and all that's left is those two goons who are on the run when Flash accidentally trips them while regaining consciousness. So Peter, being cheeky, convinces the class that Flash is Spider-Man after all, and all in all, it's a pretty nice story moment. And while the living brain was as dull as a rock, I actually say that half evened out for me. In all the double issues so far, the second half is significantly better than the first, which is why they've all kind of evened out to around C tier, but I really like this first half, so I'm really interested to see if this can continue the momentum, especially with the second half being another Fantastic Four crossover, which, in my opinion, have been the best issues. We start off with Spider-Man stalking the Human Torch. And bro, he hates the Human Torch, like he despises this guy. But the last time we saw him, he was showing funny math and inspiring Peter into taking down Doc Ock. So what's changed? Well, don't hold your breath, because there's no answer. He just hates him. Anyways, Spider-Man crashes the party by creating a bat made out of webs to scare everybody because, as I must remind you, Peter Parker is a profit-hungry borderline incel who has no respect for anybody. Spider-Man! I might have known. And the Human Torch is no amateur, so Peter's like, okay, well maybe I shouldn't have fucked with him and call it a draw. And the other three members show up and they're like, hey, things seem to be getting out of hand, what's going on? But then Peter does a 180 and is like, oh, you think this is out of hand? I'll show you out of hand. And 1v4s them again, like for the second time. So he gets captured because of course he does. And Sue is like, Human Torch, Spider-Man, you guys gotta make up. And they're both like, nah, fuck that. And then Spider-Man just leaves and then flirts with Sue for a bit. And then we get a fourth wall blurb that's like, Spider-Man's not dumb. He picks his enemies very carefully. But why? Why would he ever want to bully the Fantastic Four along with some innocent bystanders? I don't understand this at all. I don't think there's anything wrong with the actual action or the dialogue. The story, just for the first time, makes zero sense. Still, a pretty nice first half with a confusing but entertaining second earns issue number 8, B tier. This is my only knowledge of Electro the villain, so let's just say he's got some big shoes to fill. We start off with a nice preface page and another letter from the editor, hyping this comic up quite a bit, which they haven't really done to this extent before. And to begin the story, we finally get good material of Peter just being a hero, saving the day, taking his tragedy to heart as he just swung right past a shootout and didn't help anybody. It's not for no reason, as Aunt May is sick and in the hospital, and all the while Electro steals some stuff, or whatever. These villains are all the same. Peter is just beside himself because of his aunt, to the point where Flash Thompson is gonna talk to him, but Peter can't even pay him the peace of mind, since Peter needs money for healthcare expenses. This is just a continuation of such an extensive issue that I thought we were almost done with, but Peter is like, I gotta find some crime to photograph to get money. So back to Electro, he robs a bank that J Jonah Jameson is in, and he calls him by name, and he's like, oh, so this bastard must know me, and he climbs walls. Therefore, Electro is Spider-Man. And so he goes to the cops, and the cops are like, do you have any proof? And he's like, oh, and he just like storms away. We get some more context around Electro's origins, and Peter doctors photos to suggest that Spider-Man actually is Electro to get some money, and I'm just done with this right now. So during Aunt May's operation, while Peter's busy, Electro breaks into a prison and is like, aha, I have freed you all, and now you will work for me. Anyways, Aunt May's okay now, yay, so now Peter can go and stop Electro, and now that they are in the same place, it is proof that they are not the same person. Spider-Man, equipped with some handy rubber gloves, takes care of the minions and Electro, and finishes him off with some good old water in a pretty decent fight, I would say. I like how he pulls his mask off and he's like, let's see who you are. I don't know you. I don't know if I'm just in a better mood or something, but I found that to be alright. I can't really point out anything that was spectacular, but I think it was some good fun. B tier. Well, we made it to our very last issue of the video, and boy am I excited, because at least according to the cover, we are finally gonna learn why J Jonah Jameson hates Spider-Man. And the writers are officially cocky now. In this issue, there's a letter from Stan Lee saying, "Be warned, this issue is so good, it's gonna ruin lesser magazines." Well, is he right? Not entirely, but also not entirely. So this issue opens up with the Enforcers, who are not great. I have raged on the other villains as feeling like a weekly cartoon, but at least they felt like Bowser. These guys feels like the fucking Koopalings. And they are led by the big man, and that is the only time I will refer to him by name, and he quickly consolidates the gangs and launches an organized crime spree. Police are able to get the low-level guys, but it makes no dent in the overall operation. Then we cut to J Jonah Jameson being like, "It's obviously Spider-Man, you gotta go after Spider-Man, he's all behind this." And then the cop is like, "Dude, chill." But our J Jonah Jameson has no chill and calls in this columnist Foswell to do a series of hit pieces on Spider-Man to somehow prove that he's behind this. And it definitely seems like Triple J has lost the public's confidence by now. After the whole electro fake photos debacle, it's nice to see events in these stories actually carry over. But then the Enforcers barge in because J Jonah Jameson's secretary, Betty Brant, owes them money. Now, Betty is actually a pretty significant character that I've completely omitted thus far. She was waiting with Peter at Aunt May's operation, they frequently speak at the Daily Bugle, and are pretty madly in love, but I honestly don't know what to say about her character, so when she gets some sort of plot that excites me, I'll bring her back up. Safe to say, she is by far the nicest character in this world, and bringing her into a story is pretty smart. She's too embarrassed to tell Peter that she has been using a loan shark, so it gives Spider-Man a lot of extra motivation to deal with these guys. So Spider-Man tracks down the Enforcers, they fight, and he has to flee, but right as he does, he sees J Jonah Jameson. So Peter calls Betty, but she skipped town because she doesn't have enough money to repay the mobsters, and not knowing that Peter's Spider-Man doesn't want to get him involved. And now we have one of the most interesting problems plaguing Spider-Man. The Enforcers, unlike every other supervillain, don't want anyone to find them. They aren't reaching out to Spider-Man to frame him, they aren't reaching out to kidnap him, they just exist in the shadows. Adding on to that, Betty, the only person in this world who is nice to Peter by his own admission, has left, and J Jonah Jameson might be tied into this whole thing. So for the first time, Spider-Man can't solve this, but Peter can. By the way, Flash is just really wholesome. In these last few issues, he's like warned Peter not to get involved with the Enforcers, and he actually visits Aunt May in the hospital twice. I just think it's really cute. So Peter's loudly like, "I know who the boss is, haha," and someone overhears and tells the boss. But it turns out he already knows who Peter Parker is and immediately sends for his capture. Peter surrenders himself and in his cell changes into his suit and solos all of the mobsters and Enforcers in a sequence I found myself genuinely enjoying. Spider-Man signals the police, but right before he can catch them, the boss has escaped. The next day at the office, Jonah's furious, ranting how terrible this week has been. And so this cop comes in and Jonah's like, "Spider-Man's behind it. Spider-Man is the crime boss, I know it." And the cop's like, "No, he isn't. We already caught the guy." And it turns out the big boss is Foswell. Dun dun dun. Now, some of you may have seen this twist from like a mile away, and the whole story is alluding to Jonah being the big man. There, I said it. So a twist is obvious in 2025 logic, but just a couple of issues before, the reptile doctor turned out to be just the lizard with no twist. So I feel torn between guessing what a regular writer would do and what 4D chess player Stan Lee would, and it made for arguably the best story by far. But what about the title page? Why does J Jonah Jameson hate Spider-Man? Well, and I promise you I am not joking, the logic of why J Jonah Jameson hates Spider-Man is because he doesn't do things for profit. I would definitely say he does, but I will cut them a little bit of slack because from Jonah's perspective, he really can't know that. We get some pretty brutal self-reflective dialogue and we end on an actual open thread. Peter and Betty, worlds apart, dangled in a web more powerful than Spider-Man's. The web of love. That's some good Spider-Man. I am a simple man. Focus more on J Jonah Jameson and I am a happy fella. Easy S tier, and I do think this is the best issue I have read so far, and the first one to really make me hungry to read more. So in this episode, we have our S tier, 2 B tiers, a D, and an F, and I would definitely say just read the top 3 I've listed and spare yourself, but as a package, I would give The Amazing Spider-Man issues 6 through 10 a 3 out of 10. In addition to working 50 hours a week at my full-time job, videos like this take a long time to make, so I would really appreciate that if you enjoyed this type of content, that you subscribe and let me know what other comics I should read to dive deeper into the medium. Have a good one.